Let's take a look at some qualifying championships. Hello, my name is Alex Does F1 Stuff and welcome back to another statistics video. It has been a little while since I have recorded anything. I took a small little break just to get away from the computer, get away from everything like that and just sort of refresh and reset. But I am back and today we are looking at qualifying championships. This video was suggested by a commenter left on, I can't remember which video exactly, but I'll pop the comment up on the screen now, and it was kind of cool to actually research this. So what we're going to be looking at today is the years 2019 down to 2010. I'm going to run this as a sort of series going in 10-year blocks, and we are looking at what would happen if F1 did a championship based off of qualifying, not the races. So points are scored exactly the same as they are currently, excluding the point for fastest lap for achieving pole position. 25 points for first, 18 for second, 15 for third, all the way down to 1 for 10th place. So without further ado, we are going to jump on into the qualifying championships of today's episode, and we begin with the year 2019. It starts off well for Lewis Hamilton, but it is Valtteri Bottas who takes the lead at Azerbaijan, with Hamilton retaking it by Canada. There is then a nice ding-dong battle between the two Ferraris and Max Verstappen as he overtakes both of them for third, but Charles Leclerc goes on a run of 4 pole positions in a row to close in on Valtteri Bottas, but Lewis Hamilton wins the title in Brazil. And for those interested to see what this would look like in terms of a points table, here is that exact thing. Now, I have also looked at a points distribution, taking their final positions, and I've sort of graphed them a little bit like this, and you can see an enormous drop off in points from 5th place to 6th place. 197 points is that difference. Now I'm going to pull up the percentage of points won by that champion, and that is 73%. 73% of the points available to Lewis Hamilton went his way. That is crazy. And I've also put on a linear gradient for my points distribution graph, which is a gradient of 21.7. Technically a negative gradient as the line is going down. I've just taken that negative away to make it a bit easier to understand. So the aim of this gradient is to show how even the points are distributed. If this gradient is lower to 0, we have a more even distribution of points across the board, whereas the steeper this gradient, the higher the number, the more or the less distributed the points are, and everyone is extremely spread out across the year. And then just moving on to have a look at the individual positions for this year. The table looks a little bit like this, and I've created a separate graph for the number of pole positions. Charles Leclerc had 6, Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas share 5, Max Verstappen 3, and Sebastian Vettel 2, with 30% of the drivers on the 2020 grid scoring a pole position and 90% of the drivers on the 2020 grid scoring points. So that is the pro forma of how this video is going to run. A nice championship progression graph, the championship points with the points distribution, then the championship positions, and then the number of poles, followed by a few percentages. So let's take a look at 2018. It is again Lewis Hamilton who gets off to a flying start in Australia, but Sebastian Vettel takes the lead by round 2. Valtteri Bottas is fighting with Kimi Räikkönen, with the 2 Red Bulls slightly lower. But Hamilton starts to come back in the second half of the season and manages to take the lead in Japan and ends up winning the championship again in Brazil, with the 2 Red Bulls fanning out lower down and Valtteri Bottas beating Kimi Räikkönen. And taking a look at what this would look like in terms of points, Lewis Hamilton wins by 46, with 58 down to Bottas in 3rd place. And looking at the visualization of the points distribution, we have something that looks fairly similar to last year, but it is a lot of a much more steeper curve down towards the midfield, with 78% of the points this time round going to Lewis Hamilton, and a linear gradient that is steeper than last year of 22.5. And then taking a quick look at the table of positions for this round, we have the number of pole positions for Lewis Hamilton being 11 for this year, 5 for Sebastian Vettel, 2 for Bottas and Ricciardo, and 1 for Kimi Raikkonen, with again 30% of this grid achieving a pole position and 90% scoring points. Very similar to 2019. And then we have 2017, another year which starts off extremely well for Lewis Hamilton, who maintains his lead all the way out up until Monaco, where Sebastian Vettel takes the lead briefly for just one round. It is a close-fought battle until the first half of the season, but in the second half, Lewis Hamilton absolutely storms away and wins the championship in Mexico with 2 rounds to go, with again the Red Bulls fanning out just lower than the top 4. Taking a look at the points table overall, it was Lewis Hamilton who won by 37 points, and then chucking this in the corner, we have a visualization of the points distribution for the 18 scorers, looking very similar to the previous year again. There are 80% of the points going to Lewis Hamilton though this year, the highest percentage we have so far, and a linear gradient of 22.1, with the positions table looking a little bit like this, with Lewis Hamilton missing out in Monaco and Brazil, but still achieving the most pole positions. 11 once again, 4 for Vettel, 4 for Bottas, and 1 for Kimi Raikkonen as well. Only 17% of the drivers who raced in 2017 achieved a pole position, with 80% scoring points. And then we have 2016, a year that is dominated by Nico Rosberg. It starts off well for Lewis Hamilton with a pole position in Australia, but after that, it is just Nico Rosberg. He absolutely storms it this year with an intense battle between Daniel Ricciardo and Sebastian Vettel as Max Verstappen joins the team 5 rounds into the season to slowly catch up to the Ferraris, but it is Rosberg who wins in Mexico. And taking a look at the points, he won by 48 overall, with 125 points the gap between Hamilton and Ricciardo, with again a pretty hideous looking points distribution. The top 2 miles away from everybody else, who are then miles away again from the rest of the field, with 83% of the points going to the champion. That is the highest percentage we have had so far, with a linear gradient of 26.7, the steepest we have had so far and the most uneven distribution of points yet. With the positions looking a little bit like this, Nico Rosberg not being off of the front row at all. However, it was Lewis Hamilton who had more pole positions, 12 across the whole year, but 2 failures to score any points in China and Belgium really knocked off his championship hopes. 8 for Rosberg and 1 for Ricciardo, with just 12% of drivers scoring a pole position and 67% scoring points. Then how does 2015 fare? It starts off extremely well for Lewis Hamilton with some pole positions in the opening rounds. Nico Rosberg is having a little bit of a battle with Sebastian Vettel but pulls away in the mid-half of the season. The Williams pair are having a nice battle with the other Ferrari of Kimi Raikkonen, and the Red Bulls are jostling with them as well, but it is Lewis Hamilton who wins the championship in Mexico once again with an astonishing display, finishing in front of Rosberg by 42 points, and again 132 is the gap to Vettel, with a points distribution that looks a little bit like this. Incredibly steep drop off from the top 2 to 3rd place this time, with 86% of the points this year going to the champion and a linear gradient of 23.6. And taking a look at the positions table, if it wasn't for a 5th place in Singapore, Hamilton would have had the same record as Nico Rosberg the year prior. But if we tally up the number of pole positions, it is again 11 for Lewis Hamilton, 7 for Rosberg, and 1 for Sebastian Vettel, with just 14% of the drivers who raced in 2015 scoring a pole and 76% scoring points. But what does 2014 have in store for us? The first year of the turbo hybrid era. It is Lewis Hamilton who starts off extremely well with the first few pole positions of the year, but Nico Rosberg comes back to take the lead of the championship and absolutely romp off heading into the summer break. The 2 Red Bulls are battling with the Williams as the Ferrari of Fernando Alonso tries to fight his way above the pack as well, but Nico Rosberg wins the championship in the USA, with the points tally looking a bit like this. He won it by 75 points over Lewis Hamilton, and chucking this in the corner and pulling up the points distribution, it looks a little bit like this. Again, incredibly steep drop off from 1st to 2nd and then 2nd to 3rd, with 85% of the points going to the champion and a linear gradient of 22.2. But the positions table of this year looks a little bit more even, with the tallies of pole positions looking like this: 11 for Rosberg, 7 for Hamilton and 1 for Felipe Massa, with 13% of drivers scoring a pole and 69% scoring points. Then we head to 2013, a year which was dominated by Sebastian Vettel, although he did have some challenges from the Mercedes pair as they were jostling with the Red Bull across the whole year, with Hamilton taking the lead at 1 point, but Sebastian Vettel taking it back and winning the championship in the USA, with the Ferraris fighting with the Lotuses. With the points table looking a little bit like this: Sebastian Vettel leading by 72 points at the end, with a points distribution that looks something like this as well. As we've seen the trend across the whole years that we've looked at in today's episode, extremely steep drop-offs from the first few places all the way to the midfield, with 80% of the points going to Sebastian Vettel, but a linear gradient of 19.8, with the positions table looking a little bit like this, and then tallying those up, it's actually fairly even. Sebastian Vettel scoring 9, Hamilton scoring 5, Rosberg 3 and Webber 2, with 17% of drivers scoring a pole and 78 scoring points. And then we begin 2012, one of the fairest seasons of the past few years. Lewis Hamilton gets off to a flying start in the McLaren, leaps and bounds above everybody else, but Sebastian Vettel comes up to meet him at the second half of the season, with the Ferraris, the Mercedes, the Lotuses, the McLarens, everyone jostling for positions, but it is Lewis Hamilton who wins the championship in the United States for McLaren, with the points table looking a bit like this: 50 points between first and second, 44 between second and third, with the points distribution very, very, very shallow indeed, not even reaching the top end of the y-axis on that, with 60% of the points going to Lewis Hamilton this year and a linear gradient of 17.5, with the positions table very, very distributed, with the number of poles being spread out incredibly well: 7 for Hamilton, 6 for Vettel, 2 for Alonso, 1 for Webber, 1 for Button, 1 for Maldonado, 1 for Schumacher and 1 for Rosberg, with 30% of the grid achieving a pole and 70% scoring points. And then we move to 2011, a year that I'd not even bother going to commentating on this one. Sebastian Vettel destroyed everybody this year. Mark Webber, the 2 Ferraris and the 2 McLarens just fought with each other and took points away, while Sebastian Vettel blitzed the rest of the field and won in Japan with 4 rounds still to go. And he ended the championship 160 points clear from Mark Webber, with an absolutely hideous points distribution between first and second, and then second all the way down to 8th place, with 93% of the points going to Sebastian Vettel and a linear gradient of 21.6, with the positions table looking a bit like this, again not being outside of the top 3 across the whole year, and Sebastian Vettel scored 15 pole positions compared to Mark Webber's 3 and Lewis Hamilton's 1, with just 11% of the year or of the field scoring a pole and 64% scoring points. And then finally we have 2010, the first year of today's episode. We have a good start for Sebastian Vettel, but he is definitely jostling with Mark Webber, who takes the lead at Turkey, but Sebastian Vettel takes it back heading into the summer break, with the McLarens and the Ferraris battling, with also the Mercedes and the Renaults as well, but it is Sebastian Vettel who wins in Brazil with 1 round spare. The points tally looks a little bit like this: 48 points clear at the end of the year, with a points distribution that looks a little something like this. Very, very similar to what we have seen across the whole video so far. 80% of the points going to Vettel and a linear gradient of 23.5. And the final positions table as well looks a bit like this. Sebastian Vettel clearly the I've completely forgotten the word. Clearly the most consistent. There you go. Clearly the most consistent driver throughout this whole year, accruing 10 pole positions, 5 for Webber, 2 for Alonso, 1 for Hamilton and 1 for Nico Hülkenberg as well, with 18% of the grid scoring points and 59% scoring points. And there we have it. That is the end of today's random F1 episode, taking a little look at the qualifying championships and how fair they would have been. I have one final table which I'll just pop up in front of me here, which just displays the order of these 10 years, looking at the gradient, looking at the percentage of points won by the champion, the percentage of what's on there as well. I can't remember. I've made a table that basically color codes each of the years and has the years in order. But that is all I've got for you today, guys. I hope you have enjoyed, and I will catch you in the next episode with whatever and whenever I decide to make it. I'll see you guys then.